Ladies and gentlemen, and joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on the President's visit to Brussels today and also the Libyan file, we're joined by Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Amir, before we start talking about the Libyan file, we want to shed light on President Sisi's arrival at the Belgian capital, Brussels. The EU-Africa summit now, it is quite a significant visit, and obviously the discussions regarding climate change, preparations for the COP27 summit that will be taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November, talking about renewable energy, talking about getting the African continent and the African countries its good share of renewable energy and the not having to pay the price for the climate change, as the President mentioned before. How significant is such a visit, and what do you think would be achieved?
Well, first of all, that means that Egypt is the major partner for Europe and a representative of Africa. And I remember that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, before Egypt became the head of the African Union and afterwards, used to say, we will defend Africa's case in front of the international arena in all its burden. It means that this continent has been the victim of lots of difficulties. And President Sisi just mentioned a few days ago that the colonization of this continent harmed the people on the long term. So I think that now Europe especially needs to hear the voice of Africa through charismatic person, through a leadership which gives the assurances to the Europeans that if you will work with Africa, on the ground of Africa, you won't have any more problems with the immigration, you will have more investment outside of your countries, and we could work together on the renewable energy, the green energy as they call it, and we could work on saving the planet, because we have seen what happened in the Amazons. It was destroyed, and Africa is one of the last places where we could achieve this protection of the environment. So I think that now Europe understands very well that working with Africa would help them a lot, especially with the declining economic situation after the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that also they have the interest on working with countries like Egypt for their own security, for countries like Libya and what's taking place from terrorism. So strengthening the relations with Africa is a win-win situation for both continents.
Well, you've mentioned that the European countries would benefit in the files of security, talking about strengthening the relationship with the African continent's economic benefits for Europe, security benefits for Europe. Now, obviously, the African countries would, and the African continent would benefit in terms of the investments and the cooperation with Europe. But it seems that Egypt has and is making genuine effort to really get the best for the African continent. How can we ensure that the Europeans would actually have the same genuine effort in trying to really translate all these meetings and all the memoranda of understandings being signed into real concrete steps being taken?
There's two factors. The first is time, and the second is the competition. Time, I think that the Europeans understand now that they have to find alternative markets. And if the countries in Africa would remain in poverty, they have no chance of finding new markets. So through the calendar and the long term, things will change. And I think that they are real serious about working with personalities in Africa, like President Sisi, and they want to work with the youth also. The second factor is the competition with China and Russia. I think, let's be frank, what made Europe interested in Africa, the major point, and I should have put it as the first point, is the presence of Russia and China inside the African continent. And this is a huge threat for Europe and for the United States also. So now the Russians are present in Central Africa with forces. They have not regular forces. They have the Wagner, which is like the Blackwater companies, and they are working in securing some strategic zones very sensitive for France and other countries like Belgium also. And the Chinese are present everywhere. They are working with the people, constructing factories, inaugurating new projects there. One of the main examples, what we have in the sector of the Suez Canal. It's China and Russia who is offering all the investment demands to Egypt, and we're still studying it, but this is a huge threat also for Europe, and Egypt is part of Africa. So that's why there is this problem for the Europeans. They want to get rid of the mentality of the colonization, because the Russians and the Chinese, from their communist past, they have the equality and they know how to speak to the people in Africa, telling them we are all one, we will work together, the Europeans were harmful for you, and we are here to build with you.
Yes. Dr. Amir, now, during this summit, this visit to Brussels, now they've been talking about climate change and renewable energy and everything, and Egypt is hosting the Egypt's 2022, which is all about petroleum, all about energy, all about electricity. It really is a major step trying to put Egypt on the map of energy and becoming an energy hub. Even the president met with head of the British Petroleum Company, head of Apache Company, talking about signing agreements of exploration, excavation, all of these things. Now, does that put Egypt specifically, not just the whole African continent, but Egypt specifically, in a pole position to be able to be a major player? I mean, if you're mentioning that Russia and China are actually very present in Africa, now Egypt is also becoming, I wouldn't say slowly but surely, but it's definitely very, very fast becoming surely an energy hub within the African continent. What does that make Egypt, or how much of a weight does it give Egypt politically among the international community?
Well, it makes Egypt a pillar inside the club, as we call it, the gas club, for example, and the energy clubs. We are showing to the world that we had these resources, and we didn't exploit it for a long time. When we decided now to act and to go to the Mediterranean and start exploiting it, we had these, let's say, defiances from Turkey and other countries. We showed to the world that Egypt is a strong country on two bases. The first one is diplomatically. We have signed agreements with several countries about the energy. We have created the gas club, as I just said, in the Middle East. And the second point is militarily, because we were never a threat. We were never afraid when we saw the Turkish Navy trying to harass our companies. We were present, strong, and we showed the world so we can ensure the protection of every investment, and this was a very strong sign. So I think that we are the hub because of these factors, that you're a country showing to the world that you're capable of managing and respecting the international law, and in the same time, when there's something if I can call it a rogue state, who are trying to harass and create problems, well, you can stand and stand firm. So this would put Egypt on the African map, like countries like Nigeria, for example, because they are producers of the oil, and countries like South Africa, who are they have other productions also. So for years, unfortunately, we were not that important in Africa. Now we're telling the world we could play the game through Africa or the Middle East, as you choose. But in both cases, we are the major partner. You cannot avoid us. We have the Suez Canal, and at the same time we have the agriculture, we have the Nile, and we have our energy. So this shows that this is a country who has a place in the Middle East, in Africa. Whenever they want to contact us, they will sign the agreements because Egypt respects the international law and it has the military force to preserve its sovereignty.
Yes. Well, now let's turn our attention to tonight's topic, which is the Libyan issue. Now, Libya is our immediate neighbor, the closest neighbor on the west side. Now, a few months ago, we've been talking about prepping for the December 24th elections, talking about if it's going to happen or not. Are the foreign forces and the militias, are they going to withdraw from Libya? Well, obviously, they've missed the elections deadline, and now we're in February. A new prime minister has been appointed, the former interior minister, Fathi Bashagha. Now, how would you see such a move? Is it a move that is being welcomed by all divisions in Libya? Does it favor one division over the other? How do you see it on some sort of a roadmap to electing a new president? I mean, Libya's national security is part and parcel of our security. So how do you move such an important appointment?
Well, let's be frank. Fathi Bashagha is not someone who has unilateral admission. He is a controversial personality. He was the interior minister at the time of Al-Wafaq, the government of Sarraj. And I think that he's very alert now. He knows that the rules of the game have changed. I heard his statement. He was trying to be very, very positive. He thanked the prime minister, the outgoing prime minister Dibeiba, and he was trying to give assurances to everyone. Well, time will tell. I think that he knows that Egypt is the pillar of security of his own nation, and that one of our main demands is the departure of the mercenaries, particularly the Turkish mercenaries. They have this group called Sadat. It's a group of mercenaries present there. So I think that he, as a prime minister now, he promised that he will make all his efforts to unite the people. We'll see. The second point is that he has to tell these foreign forces, you have to leave. Else, he would not be able to maintain the situation until the coming elections. The third promise he made, that he won't be a candidate for president, he won't be president. So let's wait and see. I'm not speaking that he will be a candidate. I'm speaking about wasting time of being prime minister for a long period. So we're watching closely. As you said, Libya is part of our national security. And whoever governs Libya has to put in his own calculations this point. You would never be able to do anything without Egypt's blessing. It's not that we're interfering. On the contrary, Egypt's blessing is always about security, about stability. We don't wish to see any mercenaries there. We could have taken this as an excuse to defend our national security, and we didn't. And that's why President Sisi, when he spoke about the red line in Sirte and Jafra, everyone thought that we will deploy our forces because we had the right to do it. this country didn't have a sovereignty, and Turkey and other forces sent their forces there. We could have invaded and have protected our sovereignty. It's the international law. But I think that now things are very clear for the new prime minister. He would be, I think he should start contacting President Sisi if he wants to unite the people. It will take time because not all the factions, answering your questions, not all the factions agree about his personality, but he is in a tough exam now. He has to show the world that he is a credible person.
Yes. Well, you've mentioned that only time will tell, and surely it will. But if he's making a promise of withdrawing all the mercenaries from Libya, what would make Bashagha, what would help him succeed where his predecessors failed? Is it his personality? Is it his contacts, international contact? Is it his background of being a former interior minister? How could he succeed where his predecessors failed?
Well, as you said, the first point, his background, he worked under the government who unfortunately contacted these mercenaries. So he knows all the keys. He has all the keys in his hands. He knows who brought these people. So I think that he knows to whom he has to speak. And he has to explain to those he worked with before that the rules of the game have changed. I think that he has to be also very, let's say, aware that he is under scrutiny because we are not willing to repeat the past. If he will succeed in what his predecessor failed, well, I won't tell you again, time will tell, but I will tell you that Egypt's reactions will determine the situation. Because if he will remark at a certain time that we are not really glad about what's taking place in Libya, and we have our influence, and the people of Libya, they support Egypt, and we have several allies in there. So I think that he will understand that he will be failing and miserably failing. So he has to calculate very well the next steps about these mercenaries. They have to go and they have to leave the Libyan soil. If not, I think that we will go back to the past again. But now Egypt is stronger than ever.
Yes. Dr. Amir, how long should a process, a political process, take place in trying to unite all the different divisions and factions within Libya, getting all the international, the governmental institutions, the legislative bodies there? With the change or with the appointment of a new prime minister, should we expect for such a process to take a long time, many months, maybe even getting into a year? Or with this new personality, the former interior minister becoming a prime minister, having, as you've mentioned, all the keys in his hands already, do you think this process can go much faster than the international community expects?
It depends on the international community itself. It depends on several issues. When I was in the research center in France during my PhD studies, I used to say that Libya is a tribal country. And tribal countries have these specific let's say, policies that we have to respect. Someone has to unite all these tribes, like Gaddafi did. I'm not saying that Gaddafi was the perfect personalities, but some countries need someone to unite them. I think that Saif al-Islam was someone charismatic for many, but I think that now that things have changed, I think that the Europeans dislike this person, and the Europeans and the international community wants to see change in Libya. They do not wish to see Russian allies, let's speak like that, Russian allies like Saif al-Islam inside Libya. So it's also a new chessboard as Ukraine and Syria. Libya is the same thing between Russia and the West. And I think that that's why Egypt is a very good candidate, because we're strong, no one can influence our decision, and we are friends to all. But in the same time, we're telling the West, you are the ones who created this chaos in Libya, and they regret it. And Hillary Clinton said it. So I think that it's clear now that things would take time, maybe a year, because this is a tribal country, and there are so many factions inside. The only thing that could fasten, or two things that could fasten the unity there and the stability. The first point, that the security of Europe will be really threatened. They will have to find a solution. And the second possibility is that the ongoing, let's say, dogfight between the West and Russia would be settled for any of, positively for any of both sides. So who will win will control also Libya.
Yes. Well, it seems that Egypt has a major role in trying to help mediate or influence the political development taking place in Libya. But as you've mentioned, many other countries are involved as well, the West, the US, Russia. And you're counting also on having the West and Russia getting into some sort of an agreement regarding Libya. But they're now at a conflict regarding Ukraine. So is it interrelated that what happens within the situation in Ukraine and how much of a conflict they're in right now, are they able to turn a blind eye and tackle the Libyan situation fair and square, objectively, without any sort of influences in another country?
Well, from what we saw today, for example, to answer your question, what took place in southern Russia of the redeployment, I don't want to call it as the media saying a retreat, it's the redeployment of the Russian forces from its borders with Ukraine. To answer the question, well, at the same time, everyone was focusing about this redeployment, but at the same time, Sergei Shoigu, who is the defense minister, Russian defense minister, was present in Syria, in Damascus. They have controlled today the coast of Syria with massive military presence, and also the airspace with strategic bombers. So it's a chess board. President Putin, the Tsar, is playing the chessboard now. It's with his counterparts in Europe. He's redeploying his forces with Ukraine. At the same time, he's pushing his forces in Syria, which is in the south of the Mediterranean, or the middle, let's say, in the east. And he's trying to show that, as you said, they are trying to tackle other parts. He's telling the Americans and the Europeans, I have also my bases, and I can work in Syria. Tomorrow you will find me working in Libya, if you would like. So he is moving he's playing the chess as a Russian. He's playing the chess in a very clever way. And I think that he could say at any time checkmate, because his presence is unexpected. He could move swiftly into Ukraine, or he could move something in Syria to control the Mediterranean.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously it's quite of an interconnected and interrelated developments taking place all over regarding as well in relation to the Libyan situation. Now, the people of Libya are still also trying to work out a political roadmap to hold the delayed elections that was slated for December 24th, trying to pick a new date, have some sort of a schedule to have new elections. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Lawmakers in the Libyan capital of Tripoli began talks on the future of their government more than a month after the country failed to hold its first presidential election. The first deputy speaker of the House of Representatives, Fawzi Al-Nouri, invited deputies to the meeting to coordinate efforts on the roadmap. The meeting between 46 deputies came before a session in which the Libyan House of Representatives chose former Interior Minister as the Prime Minister. Al-Nouri said in a news conference held after the meeting that the session aims to create a state of consensus with all Libyan parties in order to move forward within a roadmap that will prioritize elections and the constitutional base. He noted there are also plans to choose the executive authority, complete national reconciliation, unify the nation's security by arresting armed groups and evacuating all foreign forces from the country. Meanwhile, the head of the High Council of State in Libya called on the House of Representatives to adopt an integrated roadmap for the next stage, warning that a decision to change the executive authority unilaterally would lead to the birth of a dead government. Meanwhile, the current Libyan Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibeh rejected Parliament's decision to choose a new premier and vowed to hold on to power, calling the vote illegitimate. Lawmakers voted in favor of a set of constitutional amendments that put forward a new roadmap for the country's transition to a democratically elected government. The amendments envisage the creation of a new electoral commission and the appointment of a 24-member committee representing the country's all three regions to draft a new constitution. The country was already in political limbo after its failure to hold national elections on time in December. The elections were supposed to end more than a decade of instability, which has plagued Libya since the Arab Spring revolt in 2011 overthrew Muammar Gaddafi.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Amir. Now, Doctor, the Libyan factions and the Libyan parties, we've been seeing a lot of efforts done by Egypt, Cairo, a lot of the international community as well. You've mentioned the tribal nature of the Libyan people, the tribalism within the population. And Egypt has exerted many efforts connecting and uniting these tribes and the leaders together. And everything was set for that December 24th date. However, things didn't work out as planned. And apart from the mercenaries and the militias, their presence in Libya, still the divisions reoccur, resurface, in spite of all the efforts done by Cairo, by other countries as well. Why does it keep resurfacing?
Because there is presence of foreign forces. When there is a faction working, this was like the Lebanese civil war. When there is a faction, political faction, who is saying that they are against the unity, and then they find themselves helped and financed by militias, they get more and more stronger in voicing their refusing of this unity. But the moment you cut the finance, outside interference and the mercenaries, I think that these factions would be silenced democratically, peacefully, because they will know that they are the minority. It's like exactly what's taking place in Lebanon now, and the Hezbollah, who is just present there, and they're not the majority, but still the country is in ruins because of this militia who has arms. So the thing that's taking place in Libya, why is surfacing? Because these factions, they have mercenaries, they have backing from the outside countries. Unfortunately, Europe didn't move swiftly against Turkey in this prospect, and the whole burden was on Egypt. Well, Egypt won't do the whole job because we respect the international law. We respect about defending our borders, helping the Libyan army, national army, and Khalifa Haftar in combating terrorism, but we won't do more than that unless our national security is on the verge of a real threat. Now, I will tell you, the international law gives us the green light to act if the international community won't act. So that's the question, that's the answer. These factions who are trying to destabilize the unity of Libya, they have to be disarmed. Or let's say the mercenaries helping them or strengthening them have to go.
Yes. Then the problem seems to stem from the existence of the mercenaries and the militias and the foreign forces. That's why the 5+5 Joint Military Commission has been tasked to do is unify the Libyan army and really help create a strong force that will be capable of pushing outside the militias and the mercenaries from Libya. Now, is it possible that the 5+5 Joint Military Commission be able to unify the Libyan army? And how soon can it happen? And why didn't it happen sooner? And how can Cairo influence that Joint Military Commission to help at least try and stem out the main problem that you've mentioned?
Well, the first step, why there is still the embargo, the UN embargo against Libya, against the national army? Gaddafi is gone. He's dead. Why there is, until now, and Egypt voiced its concern about that, you should lift the embargo to arm the Libyan army so they could fight and defend the country against terrorism. There is no explanation until that. And when there is an embargo, it means there will be smuggling, arms smuggling. So you will have multiple problems. You have immigration, you have drugs, you will have traffic of oil and stolen, and also armed trafficking. So why the international community isn't dealing with this point? If you will lift the embargo and give the army of Libya the possibilities, well, we could be very happy to have these commissions working, as you said, working to strengthen the Libyan army also. Why we're not giving autonomy for the Libyan army? Why there is this fear? We could control the kinds of arms they could have. It was done with, for example, Germany after the World War II, Second World War II. It was controlled, and with Japan. It could be the same thing. We could say, well, they will have this amount of tanks or let's say artillery, but blocking all this and creating commissions, and these commissions are working through other agendas. Every country will work for its interests. Egypt will work for its interests. It's normal. We have to all defend, every country has to defend its own sovereignty. So I think that the international community lacks the will to say that this is the time to create a national army, a national government, and held the elections. The army will protect the country, and if it needs help, we will help them, and then we will block any foreign intervention. But we are turning in the same void circle of creating the problem and trying to find a solution, but we don't want to get rid of the problem, find the solution with the problem.
Yes. Dr. Amir, one final question, because we're running out of time now. You've pinpointed a couple of things that a lot of observers are actually saying that's the main problem with the Libyan situation, and it's the smuggling and trafficking of arms and oil. Now, who are the main beneficiaries of this smuggling and trafficking, and who has the power to stop and end such trafficking in oil and weapons?
Well, the trafficker was Turkey, and we have seen it several times, and also organized crime. Who could stop it? Well, Egypt was always present in the Mediterranean. We were working with our friends in Greece, Cyprus, France. Their ships are in the Mediterranean. They could block. I think that when the French tried to block the intervention of the Turks, they were threatened, and they complained to the NATO command, and NATO did nothing. It was very strange. So I think that there is also lack of will to act together militarily in the Mediterranean to stop it. And I think that at a certain time, Egypt would have its word very clear to the whole region that enough is enough, because we have done a lot to secure our borders, western borders and the maritime borders, but at a certain time, if things will go out of control, it's the international law that guides everything, for Egypt I'm speaking, and will give us the green light to stop these smugglers and fight terrorism by our own way.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems that the Libyan situation is quite a complicated one. Now, hopefully the appointment of a new Prime Minister, Fethi, the former Interior Minister, Fethi Bashagha, as the new Prime Minister, would be maybe a step towards finding a peaceful and diplomatic political solution and holding elections within the Libyan situation. But as Dr. Amir mentioned, many parties are involved. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Cherif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, always a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.